I wanted to show off, like in my reel, I try not to rely on this sound design too much, like this sort of disperser, auto filter business, because in recent years, people believe that it's being overused. And that is a whole other conversation that I will leave to other people, especially ones that are actually working professionally in the industry. To me, I think it sounds cool as hell. But again, I don't want to put it everywhere in my portfolio because I understand the feelings that people have towards it. And specifically feedback that I got, like this is a Destiny 2 ability. I shared this on a sound design group, and one of the sound designers at Bungie gave me feedback on my first version that it sounds like I just learned how to do that technique. And he was right. I had just learned how to do it. So it was pretty funny that was the first piece of feedback I got. But he was right. And so I did a revision here to tone it down, which I will show you. So first, this is the one that I believe will be in the portfolio. Sounds awesome. Sounds cool. And again, I apologize for this session not being very cleaned. But then before, what it sounded like was this. Do. So it sounds cool. But these things here, like, you know that sound. If you're into sound design, you know what that sounds like. And he was right that you can basically hear disperser working in the background. And inherently, it's not too bad. In my actual reel, I think what I might do is put this one first and then the revised one afterwards, just to sort of show that I can revise something. Not really sure if that's good to do in a reel, but either way. That was what I chose to do. And the final version that I think I ended up with sounds better, if maybe a little less energy. I tried changing it a little bit, but like if I try to change it too much, it kind of loses that, like the whole design as it was, which I actually liked, 90% of, other than just the disperser abuse. But what I ended up doing was mostly adding in these two sounds to replace some of the kind of rolling feel of it. And these are from my own library that I've done with a lot of granular stuff, like pitching, granularizing stuff down. This is the third video I've filmed today about this, and I forget that I haven't explained this in some of the videos, and so I keep on needing to go through this because I've used this technique so much in a lot of my own the sound libraries that I used in the redesigns that I did videos for today. But essentially, it's a parallel thing with unfiltered audio triad. Here you have 3 bands of things. I'm taking the the higher frequencies and pitching them down 2 octaves. I'm taking the other bands and pitching them down, 1 octave. And then it gets recombined. And with this, you can dive into that. You can pause, read that if you really want to. But basically, it's 3 parallel processes that get recombined. And you get this with this preset that I've made, this nice, cool, oh, shoot, where did I put that? Okay. This nice, cool, sort of soft, smeary, powerful, grainy texture to the sound. Because it's like pitched down and nice and loud and blah, blah, blah. And depending on, you put source into it that has a lot of bass and high frequencies and is quite balanced and full, and it sounds awesome. And well, it sounds like this, right? And so I use this to replace those zaps, at least the first 2 entirely. Whoops. So that is like, that's a lot more chargy, you're charging up into a little smackdown. And so with that, this is a little bit of Spec Ops. Spec Ops is what I reach for if I need to change kind of the power in a sound often. It's very good at making a sound feel smaller if I need it to. And so I'm doing that with low pass, noise filter, topmost solo. I won't go too deep into Spec Ops, but it separates stuff into bins and you can select with topmost or decapitate or whatever, you can isolate those in specific frequencies. So with this, I'm kind of isolating the most important and biggest frequencies, and I'm also lowering the like FFT of it, and that's how you get it sort of sounding smaller. You know, I'm reducing top end because it was a bit much, and then I also think I made it fully mono, because I wanted it to like energy to build up into that final hit. So yeah, I'll just talk about this as if I'm designing this ability. I won't go back into the whole zip zappy thing, but that was kind of, I wanted to mention that because it was a big part of the process of the sound. And then the second one here, yeah, you get your nice rolls there, and they combine with the zaps that I did leave in, which kind of help because it builds up into it. Like that's like, you know, like a nice roll. But it has a nice cadence to it, right? It's like, like it has, it's very obvious what's happening, right? You had that before too, and that was, I think, something like that I really did want to keep in this, is this, sorry, I have to keep muting and unmuting some stuff as I show the different versions, just because I didn't want to maintain two different sessions. Like there was a very obvious cadence with it, and it was interesting, and I really liked that. I maybe like the original cadence more, and again, I was like, oh, I kind of, you know, yeah, I was abusing disperser, but if it sounds cool, does it sound cool? I don't know. It's kind of hard to tell. So that's why I'm kind of debating on whether I should include both or whatever. But that was the kind of the replacement job I did, was with those. And to create these zaps in the first place, it was, I did a different session. It's just, it took me a while to kind of figure out how to do this, maybe embarrassingly, but just, you know, auto filters. I use all pass instead of like an all pass filter instead of like, use this bad boy here. Let me see this thing. This is the one I use, because I don't have disperser, but same thing basically. Then a lot of auto filters. I use this thing from, where is it? Zip. This plugin with this preset that I made, it's an auto filter. It compresses based on brightness. So it's a bit different than just like the auto filter that you will get with like Filter Freak, you know? Where are you? You know, like instead of just being like wop, 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 wop with the actual full filter and everything based on just the volume, that Zip plugin will do it based on the brightness. So it's really good to tame that stuff. And then just with de-reverb, and that's basically how you can get this sound from anything really, but the sounds that I ended up chopping up from something else were very transient heavy to get that sound. Yeah. Some sort of layer. I got that little sound in here. Very, I don't think you would have picked that out before, but now if I remove it. You notice when it's missing. But anyways, yeah, that's really like the big core of the sound. You have a few things here to sort of accent the cast. Kind of still on the disperser, you can see I had a lot of stuff, like everything was basically just that disperser sort of sound before. But I still wanted, that's what plasma sounds like to me, for the most part, like this sort of like purple magic ability. I'm sorry, but that, to me, when I see that sounds like disperser to me. I don't know about you, but that's what it sounds like to me. So when I'm charging into that, I want those sort of zaps and stuff. Leave that conversation for whether it's being abused or overused to other people. For the sake of this, I think it sounds cool, even though I did tone it down based on feedback I got. But how often are you going to get feedback from the sound guy at Bungie, you know, telling, like, yeah, I'll take your advice. If there's anybody's advice to take, it was his. So I took his advice, and I think it was improved a lot. And I sent it to him, and he said it was improved, so feeling good about that. But anyways, yeah, this stuff is basically just accentuating that. Can play each one individually, but pretty much all from the same source creation session, maybe except for, oh, this was actually the whole thing reversed. I wonder what that sounds like. Yeah, that was just, I actually exported out the whole thing and sampled that, resampled it. I do that kind of often. You can see a lot of muted stuff here. There was a lot of attempts at doing things that just weren't really hitting the mark for me. This was actually a surprisingly difficult thing to design. I'll just go through a couple of these just in case I forget anything obvious. Yeah, see, a lot of these are going to actually be with the tonal like tail that I was trying to create or experimented with. But what I ended up not liking about having such a big and obvious tail is that I distracted from the sort of like texture of it. Oh yeah, I have all these tracks here for the tail too. But that's, again, kind of, as I've discussed in another video, which I can't expect you to have watched, I tend to not like to put a lot of reverb on my sound design and instead create tails by having other audio sources just low down as they go and kind of trickle that way. I think you get these really interesting tails, and it implies that the sound itself was more complicated without actually being more complicated, if that makes sense. Like if you hear something new in the tail, you're like, oh, that was in there. Like that maybe it was so powerful, the explosion, that I didn't hear, you know, like, I don't know if that makes sense, but that's sort of the way that I think about it. So just, and this was also something that he mentioned, that there was too much disperser on it, because I low passed pretty much all of it. You know what that is. You know what that sound is. It's, you know, it's also just, it's tons and tons. I'm not going to go through each of these individually because there's no point. It's just a bunch of different chops of this source creation session with all of that all pass sort of nonsense on it. But what I did after getting his feedback that it sounded like the tails were just like, this was what he specifically was saying about hearing disperser work in the background or seeing it work. So I basically just got rid of all the really obvious disperser stuff on the top end, decapitated it a little bit, and then cut some lows out just to help make a little tail. Yeah, and it fades in really nicely from like the kind of main transient, which I'll talk about in a sec. But yeah, again, it's the same thing as the zaps, the exact same sound creation thing, so I won't go through it really. That's with all the business on it. Just a lot of disperser, as they say. What would these be? Probably same tonal stuff that I decided. I kind of made the tail by just subtly kind of adding stuff up and like paper macheing this thing that was cool but not getting in the way of the texture, because I specifically wanted that texture to come through. Sorry if it's a little jarring seeing me scroll through this whole session sometimes. Again, yeah, a lot of subtle layers adding up. Even the end of this thing. Probably get rid of that, man. So the main transient is, unsurprisingly, from that whole source creation session with a ton of dispersion. Whoops, I should probably solo it. And as you can hear, it's a nice little double transient, and you get like a boom boom in different ears, you know? It sounds, I did that just by actually inverting the stereo, because it was already somewhat of a stereo. But just staggered them and inverted them. And it's really, I gotta say, that was something that he complimented me on even on the first version, was that it was a nice transient. I think it was an even nicer transient in the first version, because there was a bit more of a gap and a bit less maybe power in the low end in the kind of build up to it, but I think it makes more sense as an ability here. And relying on volume anyways was a bit kind of a hack, because in game it's not always going to be that loud, you know, there's lots of stuff going on and blah blah blah. But nonetheless, nice transient. Same sound design process as the zaps and the tails up here, so I won't go into it. Just rewind if you need a recap on that. Then you have the kind of the main body of the impact here. So apologies that I didn't clean this session right. It's just sometimes you have a moment and you're like, oh, I'm feeling yappy right now. I should do this overview thing. I'm trying to keep up with these so that I don't end up with like 24 redesigns that I haven't done videos with. Like I was in the mood to talk a lot, so I was like, all right, let's get this done. So this is what it sounds like. The main body of the impact. And as you can hear, it's mostly just disperser stuff, but with a lot of distortion and sort of staggering on to create a longer version. So, because what I had originally done was I had this, which was kind of recreating that. So you got your filter freak. I had done all the source creation and another thing, but I needed a sort of explosion that I didn't have. You got that. You got unfiltered audio fall, which is actually just like a pitch warbler sort of thing. Then you have de-reverb. Then you have tremolo. Then you have zip. Then you have EQ that is automated. Tremolo is automated too. Then you have decapitator, and then you have something to make it mono because it was way too wide before. And so, but the thing about that is sometimes I find when I'm using this many plugins and blah, 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 they don't always react in exactly the same way. I didn't nail down, I didn't really care. And it was actually, what I'm explaining is working to my advantage is that each time that I bounced this, I was getting slightly different results, especially with how I was handling the low end transient. So you can see a bunch of different versions of it here. And so I basically just picked and choose. Some of them I did with disperser, some of them without. Like the main one that I ended up with here, I actually had muted the disperser on. So you get kind of like all the other elements of that like overused low mid rumble sound without it necessarily sounding as dispersed. And so with the tail, that was sort of what I leaned into, but I also kind of liked the dispersory tail, so I kept some of it like this. You know, like I think that texture sounds cool for better or worse. So this is kind of the non-main tail. And it's why I didn't want to create this giant tonal, like overarching layer all over the whole thing, because like that all sounds really cool. Like all of these, it's basically just disperser with EQ. I'm not going to dive into the processing of each of these because you basically just watched me do it. That one's pretty subtle. That one has a lot more disperser. Same with that one. And then this is the main one. Don't think this is much. Yeah, I'll probably get rid of that. All right, my first edit in a YouTube video, because I kind of rambled too much about something. But essentially, with this ability, I'd also experimented with making this really like tonal tail to the ability. And I'll show you kind of the gist of what it was like, or at least kind of one of the final ones that I landed on. And to me, like, that's cool. That works, right? Like, especially if you use that tonality, like, throughout the rest of the kit, and, you know, you go grab the, I don't even know what the source would have been for that. Do I have it here? Yeah, just this kind of wail, like some sort of banshee or something. It sounds cool. It sounds aggressive. It sounds not medieval, like space, magic-y, whatever. Some sort of big creature. Anyways, it sounds cool, but the thing is that it covered up a lot of the texture that I actually really liked from the first one, for better or worse. That kind of like over dispersory, whatever, you know? So it's, whoops. It's tough to kind of like make it, it's totally subjective decision, right? And it would depend on if you had like the rest of the kit. But the decision that I'm making is to not have that, because I do like the dispersory tail, and I'm not overusing that too much in my portfolio, as you may see in my reel. But I also wanted to show that I could do it. I don't even, that might be a weird thing. Like if you're already in the industry and you're hearing me say that, that might be a funny thing, but like I'm making this, like these redesigns and this reel is to either get a job or use to sort of like start freelancing for people. You know, I'm doing freelancing in the audio as an audio engineer in the music industry right now, but I also want to start doing sound design for games. And so even though this specific technique might be used and abused, I still want to show that I can do it. You know, if somebody does want that and they're the one paying me and they want something like this but adjacent to it, I want them to see that, like, oh, okay, he can do that stuff. And so anyways, when I have this big tail here, especially after that first revision, it's a lot less in that vein. And although, like, yeah, you especially if you know what you're thinking about and you're talking about and you're a sound designer too, you'll be able to pick out like, oh, that's still the sound of disperser. But without it being as obvious, without having that knowledge and just being somebody who's hiring me, or like for a freelance job, like maybe you're not a sound person, but you're hiring me as a sound person, or maybe you're somebody in the HR at a company or whatever. I just wanted to show off that I could do that, you know, and I wanted to make it really obvious that I can do this type of technique. Yeah. Hope that makes sense as a nice amendment. Before I had recorded this, I was rambling about this and like justifying. It was just a mess. I try not to edit these videos too much because partially I'm not a YouTube content creator. So I don't really want to be spending time editing these, but I just wanted to, I had said it at the end, so it was easy for me to just sort of go back a couple minutes here and punch this in. Yeah, I hope this one was cool. This was a cool ability to design. I've never really done this sound before. It was so cool to get advice from Juan about this, and I was just like so thankful to get that advice. Like, what are the, like, it was like a dream come true to post this on a Discord and get the sound designers like thoughts and opinions about it, you know, like that's priceless, you know, like you normally have to pay for that type of stuff. So anyways, yeah, if you've got any questions, leave them, whatever. Shouts out to Juan Pablo for that beautiful advice. Have a good Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, evening, night, dinner, morning, whatever. See ya.